so we'll call the meeting to order at 6:07 p.m. Any announcements?
I don't have any announcements for you. Anybody else have any announcements?
Okay. Public comments? That would be you guys.
Well,
But not. Any public comments not related to
the agenda. Yes, that's
No, there's no public here. Okay, so let's see. Do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of January 7th?
So moved.
Here's Justin. A second?
Hello. That was a long time ago.
Is that, so you're taking notes, I don't need to, right?
no, you don't need to.
Okay, and then,
Call the questions.
any,
We have a first and second.
any discussion or comments or changes? We were working on the January 7th meeting minutes. Do people want a minute to look, or did you look already? We'll give that a couple minutes. All right, that's these. Stop. We good?
Fine with me.
So, all in favor of accepting the minutes? Please, I don't know, raise your hand. How do we normally do this?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, good. So January 7th meeting.
And I
minutes.
realized the March 4th, because it wasn't actually a meeting, we don't need to approve these. It's just notes of the meeting.
Oh, 'cause we didn't have a
Probably.
quorum.
Because we didn't have a quorum, it wasn't technically an official meeting, so they're just kind of meeting notes, so.
Okay, so.
We made no decisions.
Oh yeah, that was a good video. Oh, but then also the video that you guys linked.
Oh,
Video
yes,
of the
yes,
PCT.
the TED Talk.
Mhm.
So we don't have to take action on the March ones.
Okay, all right, that's that and that. And then, should we go ahead and do the chair and the commissioner appointments?
Do you guys mind if we
Jessica's
go
here.
for it? So I probably should have mentioned, Liz McLaughlin was appointed to the select board, so she was the chair of the planning commission, so she has resigned. So that's why
We'll never forgive.
we're fumbling.
That's fine. She's the chair.
So for a chair, essentially kind of, I usually work with the chair to kind of pass the agenda by. If there's like any Act 250 or something, we'll usually be in communication. Every July we do a new slate, so this would kind of be in chair for a couple months if you wanted to try it out. We just accept nominations from amongst you. If you have any questions, but except Liz to formally submit a resignation, she can be on both boards, so.
Wait, so you're saying the Act 250 decisions are made like separate from the commission gathering as a whole?
No, so Act 250, sometimes we, Liz has written letters on behalf of the planning commission in the past when we've had some issues. It doesn't come up very often,
Right.
but the planning commission does receive notification of Act 250 applications, and we are a statutory body, so we are able to submit comments. So.
Anyone want to volunteer to be chair?
I'm happy to volunteer, but I'm also happy to not volunteer if you want to be chair.
I do not want to be chair.
Say,
Because
who wants it more?
She's on the capital review committee now.
I'm on the capital review committee, grant review committee. I also feel like because of my job, there's weird things where I'm wearing multiple hats, and I'd rather not be like the official chair. You know what I mean? I'd rather not be the
that
chair.
makes sense.
I had this come up in the Wantastic subcommittee too. Like I'm in that subcommittee, and they need a chair, and I don't want to be the chair there either because there may be points when like from the point of view of my job, I want to comment on something, and it's like, I can't do that. Same attached to the supervisor, so I would like to be chair. I think that would be fabulous. I'm totally content continuing being vice chair and vice chair.
Yeah. That's why I like to chair.
Unless someone else would like to, take on that role, but
I feel like it almost goes without saying, I've only been to 3 meetings, so I feel, I mean, I've started 3 meetings ago, is what I mean, I missed really any. But, yeah, I feel like I need to learn more, so I'm not throwing my hat in.
I definitely don't want to do it.
Can we hear why?
What's that?
Can we hear why?
Time commitment, and Elizabeth is really good at it, and I cannot fill those shoes. So
It was her career, wasn't it?
Yeah, she wasn't planning, but.
And I am too overcommitted to even try.
Whoa. No, you guys are making me scared.
It'll be fun. You can try it out for 3 months.
I can try that for 3 months.
all right, so we need to nominate, I'll nominate Felicity to be chair.
I accept.
Okay, and then do we need a second for that
You make
nomination?
a motion or something?
I will second the motion for Felicity to be chair.
And then, all in favor?
Aye.
Can I vote?
You can abstain or vote
I
as
think
you
you can
choose.
vote.
Oh, aye.
Okay. Make sure the notes reflect that Felicity voted for herself.
It's on TV.
Do we have to we have to do this because Liz has stepped down.
Yes.
So vice chair, the other things in place,
We
right?
can, everything
And
else
then we
stays in
fix
place.
it
So
in June, July.
in July, we
Okay.
have an annual meeting in July.
You can do
So,
Calvary. Okay.
Yeah, so
Can I
Kathy
make a
is vice chair
stipulation?
and Kate is.
That I start next meeting and you continue to chair this meeting.
Oh, sure.
Since you're doing such an
Yeah,
excellent
that's
job.
fine. Yeah. So chair as of whatever our next meeting. Okay, so that one's done. And then, it's been a long day, so I'm really articulate here. So Windham Regional Commissioner appointment.
Do you want me to speak to that?
Sure.
So
Yes.
the town of Brattleboro has 2 representatives to the Windham Regional Commission, and I had sent you some information on the WRC. For several years now, the town has basically appointed the planning director, and they'd like to have a planning commissioner be the town's representatives. The WRC is 27, Windham Regional Commission is comprised of 27 towns. Almost all of them have 2 representatives. Each town has 2 representatives, I think except Searsburg, who maybe has none, because there's like 5 people in Searsburg. And so they have committees, which, they like committee participation. Those committees meet at all different times, and they cover a wide variety of natural resources, the Act 250 projects, energy, community development, brownfields, there's a bunch of different topics. And then they have full commission meetings, which, Kathy, have you been to any full commission meetings? Because I actually haven't
Not
been. I
lately.
think there's been 3 since October,
Yeah.
maybe 1 that got canceled. So, and those are usually like the second Tuesday or 4th Tuesday of the month. So I told the town manager we would see if somebody from the planning commission is interested in serving on that. It's, Windham Regional Commission is really looking for people that are involved and help make the organization run. And the town is looking for somebody that is kind of looking out for the town's interests as well. Because it's a pretty diverse county.
So, can you remind me again, I'm sorry, what does the Windham Regional Commission do?
They are kind of, they're a regional planning commission, so they work on behalf of the 27 communities that they serve. They do a lot of transportation planning. So a part of their work is they have contracts from the state. So they do a lot of emergency planning that way. They do a lot of transportation planning through kind of state contracts. They kind of, they have like a brownfields program, so particularly for the little towns, they are kind of, you know, consultant planners for those communities.
Because those towns don't have staff.
Exactly.
And Windham Regional Commission has staff.
They do.
Would
Yep.
we give a few tens of thousands of dollars or so?
We do. I think the assessment is $2 or $3 per person for Brattleboro that we contribute to the Windham Regional Commission. It's kind of a assessment on every town. They've got, like today, they when the legislature's in session, they have like a public policy committee. It was today, every Monday. They have a legislator come, can move to an exchange of ideas.
Where are the meetings?
They have, their committee meetings are at their offices, which are at 147 Main Street, so above the Hooker Dunham building. And then when they have the full commission meetings, those are often in Townsend, but they can be elsewhere. Usually the Townsend Town Hall, because they find that kind of centralized.
So I can go just a little bit too. I can't do that because I am the Natural Resources Commissioner, so I'm like not an official voting commissioner, but I'm like the informative commissioner on the Regional Commission. And I'm also, because of the structure of one of the committees, the Natural Resources Committee is also the Clean Water Advisory Council, I think, for Windham County. Connecticut River Conservancy has a seat on that council, so I end up going to the Natural Resource. I'm kind of a member of the Natural Resource Committee as well. But having said that, it's not, I would view it like really as a learning opportunity, because it's not like you really don't have to do anything other than show up at the meetings, and because it's because there's like regional discussions, it's actually really informative to get perspective on how the surrounding towns as rural towns like function differently than Brattleboro, and from a statewide perspective, the planning considerations that are different in our case as opposed to the smaller towns. So, I would say that there's actually very little you have to do other than show up at meetings and learn.
So what would be the difference then in effect of someone who is solely there to learn versus someone who is incredibly skilled and capable and can have the maximum impact? Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I mean,
Like in one case, would there be like no funding or consulting or projects that come to Brattleboro? And in the other case, would there be like
No,
a huge
no,
impact? Okay.
No, it's really like, it might just be so one of the projects, they're gonna be rewriting or writing a new regional plan, kind of like we just updated our town plan. And so, it might just be discussion and policy level for kind of the region. So their regional plan is used in Act 250 proceedings. So you could be shaping a little of those policies. Or like if you were on the plan review committee, you might have, an application for some business that wants to expand, and you're going to make a decision as to, or contribute to this decision of whether it's of regional impact, and are you concerned about different aspects of the development. So, I do think it is a great learning opportunity. The community development group, they'll talk about various issues from housing to hospitals and healthcare and
Sorry. No, I was just gonna say, so the commission as a whole, and then the committees also, like, we can comment on certain, like, policy initiatives of the state or development issues that come up. The committees and the commission can also weigh in on things, but each of the committees has a staff member. So, for instance, the Natural Resources Committee is staffed by Emily Davis, who's the Natural Resources Planner at Windham Regional Commission, and she ends up doing all of the work. So, if a committee were to comment on something, it's really Emily that would draft the letter. Basically talk to everyone in the meeting, come up with a decision, get feedback, do a draft. So even in that role, like that more active role, it's the Wyndham Regional staff that does.
Helps navigate and make things
Yeah.
happen.
And how many people are they looking for off the Brattleboro?
We're looking for one more.
One more. And what time commitment is that? Once a month? Is like the first or last Tuesday?
Yeah, so their full commission meetings are, I think it's the 4th Tuesday, but they don't hold them every month.
No, there's like
For example, there
4 a
wasn't
year.
one in February. Yeah, and
Yeah,
so
they're
you can
like
call
quarterly.
in too if you can't make it, you can call in. Occasionally they, it's really important because they might have some town plans that need to be approved, so they're really looking for people to be there, or they really want you to call in so you can vote for it. Yeah, so the
So
full
it is
commission
a
meetings are
voting.
quarterly.
It is an elected. what
It's
do you
an
mean,
appointed.
Appointed.
Yeah,
Okay,
but the Wyndham Regional Commission approves everybody's town plans if you want it to be. So like we had our town plan, we submitted it to the Wyndham Regional Commission. They make sure that it meets the state's planning goals and the process goals, and then they will vote to approve it. So in those cases, they need a quorum.
I'm on their website right now. Like, what projects are they working on that are upcoming that are like exciting? Do you know of any? I'm sure there's probably.
You might want, you look at like maybe the project committee. I mean, in the past, there's often been consideration around so there's large regional considerations around wildlife passage that I think they're probably working on. I know John has talked about. They've worked a little bit on the FERC relicensing. There's been if there are energy questions that come up around windmill or large solar siting, often those will get talked about in the project committee. I'm guessing broadband.
Yeah, I
is
think
gonna
broadband
be
will be, because that seems to be
on deck.
supported in, yeah.
Well, because also the legislature is trying to address it.
Yeah. Let's see. Like I mentioned, they're working on a regional plan. They have a newly hired planner, Susan Westa, who is leading that up. I don't know where that's going to go, but I think there is more direction for addressing climate change in the regional plan. So I think that that's probably one area that they'll be focusing on a bit.
Yeah, and then I'd say transportation point of view, there's probably work on trails or bicycle pathways, passageways.
Yeah. They also, in transportation annually, they rank the projects and then submit them to the state. That's one of the program areas where they work really closely with the state because they get a bunch of funding to kind of coordinate all the transportation planning down here. So they will rank projects and submit that to the state, and then the state will decide, based on that, what are their priorities for funding. I mean, granted, they're getting them from all the regional planning commissions. One example, for several years, there's a bridge at Melrose Street on Western Avenue that is undersized, and it's also a pinch point for bicycle and pedestrian traffic because there's no sidewalks. And that has constantly been on the list, and the state does not fund a replacement because they're like, well, it's structurally sound, so we don't need to replace it yet. It's also, it causes flooding, it backs up, and Melrose Terrace areas. But it's one of those areas where, you would learn about the different projects and rank them if you were on the transportation committee. But yeah, bike ped issues are big, trails.
So what committees are you on, or which committee, and which committee was Liz on, and does the person filling her vacancy go in that committee?
Nope, you get to submit a survey as to which committees you might be interested in, what works for your schedule. I'm on the plan review committee, which is basically working with the towns and reviewing their town plans, and then maybe any special kind of trainings that they do. Though since I've been on it, that hasn't come up. And mostly that's because it fits my schedule the best. There's other committees that I would probably be interested in serving on, but it just doesn't work for me. Liz did public policy.
Oh.
That was it. So that's kind of a noon time on Monday during legislative season.
Sorry, this should not be happening. I turned it off. I have no idea why that's happening right now.
Okay.
Do I send some interest, Tom?
I'm interested, but I mean, anyone else who has more experience or desire.
Felicity just
Go-
stepped up.
Go
Just
for
like,
it, John.
now.
You know, I think we should diversify the roles.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Josh, are you interested also, or?
I mean, like, does someone have to off this committee? But I mean, like, I'm definitely interested in energy and economic development. But time commitment is obviously an issue for me. But it sounds like you're just going to learn and be a voting member. And if you guys don't want to do it, I guess I will.
I mean, Tom said he's interested, so you guys
Okay.
could like
I'll
roll
defer.
the
Yeah.
dice.
No,
So,
No, it's the seniority.
I would say
No.
they don't have a
I've only
straight
been here
up
like
economic
6 months
development.
longer than you.
Really?
They don't have a straight economic development committee. There is community development,
Yeah.
which, yeah.
Okay.
Economic development would be
Well,
nice.
then, like, especially energy and stuff, especially like,
Yeah.
transportation energy is, yeah. This all sounds fantastic. I would prefer you doing it. I would like to.
And
That's two votes for me.
I would say at this point,
Myself.
it's a recommendation, and so the select board would actually appoint, but
Right. They might choose
pass,
someone else.
I will pass your name along.
Okay. Great.
And then if they don't want
If
to.
that's the way the,
And
you
just
guys
to,
all decide.
just to set your expectations, I think the select board will want a letter or something from you. Like I've had this done before when I've been appointed and stuff, where maybe you would just need to write like your interest or why you would want to be appointed, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'd have to find that
It's
out.
like what we had to do to be on this.
Yeah, I mean, they might be
Did you
able to
have to
just
write
pull
a
that
letter?
out.
There was a form online.
Can't remember the last
Yeah,
time.
you didn't do the online volunteer form.
How'd you get here?
I don't even remember the process.
It was a
now.
long
Yeah.
time ago.
And then they'll have to vote, you know, they have to officially vote you to be the
Yeah,
commissioner.
I remember that.
Does anybody else? We don't need to vote on this, so, so you know, but I don't know,
All right.
Kate or Jess. Yeah.
Put your name first, and then you can my name second or whatever, and see how it goes.
I can.
Oh, when they see your name second on the list, they'll definitely.
Yeah, that's pretty soon.
I missed that. I'm sorry.
When they see your name as you know second option below mine, they're just
No, they're gonna
not
give
even
it to
read
you.
mine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw their Facebook comments. Okay. Made that up.
Okay.
All right. All right, so now we can move on to you guys.
But if you don't mind me just saying something, I apologize for making you sit through that. I probably should have put that at the end of the agenda. But thank you for having us, Brattleboro Listening Project. It's fun that we're here. Maybe we should go around and do introductions in a little bit about what your backgrounds are for Resignation. So, yeah. You want to start, Josh?
Sure. My name is Josh Steele, and I live in Brattleboro, Vermont. And that's about it.
How long have you been on the phone?
A year, I think, I believe. It's been a year.
Just maybe.
9 months to a year, I would say. Passing it around. Yeah, so I've been on planning commission for, let's say a year. I don't know exactly how many months. Also, town meeting rep. I've also done, I've been on, used to be on the spacing the acronym, and then now spacing the name that you guys just took the.
ACWC.
Yeah, ACWC, thank you.
Arts Council, Arts Council of Windham County.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I hope I didn't ruin a surprise. So I'm familiar with that, even though I don't remember the name anymore, it's so long ago. So yeah, I'm pretty familiar with like the art culture around Brattleboro.
Kathy Erfer, hi. Obvious Brattleboro resident. I don't know how long I've been on the planning commission, like
5, 6 years?
Shut the hell up. All right, one time. And I've lived in town for about 14 years, and let's see, my job is I'm the river steward for the Connecticut River, so I end up getting involved in a lot of things related to the river, which takes a lot of different forms. I'm also a town meeting rep, And I'm trying to do not much more than that. And I have 2 kids, school-age kids.
I am Sharon Fantle. I have been one of the organizers of the Brattleboro Listening Project, also a recently appointed chair of the Arts Council of Windham County. I work by day in Keene, New Hampshire at the Redford Arts Center, just kind of do this like in the Keene area, but have also been involved in other kind of larger New England circles network of arts practitioners, and also 2 school-age kids, and resident of Brattleboro for, I guess, going on 13 years.
I'm Chrissy Lee. I'm one of the organizers for the Listening Project. I'm also one of the newly elected board members of the Arts Council of Windham County. You know it's a good acronym when no one remembers.
I always call it ACWAC. It's not great, but.
I am a relatively new.
Does this come in and ask us about it? Does it just come in and ask or something?
For what?
A listening project or something?
Yes, this is what this is.
Come on in.
Should share over there.
Oh, that's broken. I'm not
Yeah, maybe we can make this space on the
Should we?
shift a little.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Should
I
have.
want to tell you that.
I should go there.
Oh my God.
So can I ask you what it's about?
Yeah, well, so we're actually hosting the planning commission. So a lot of these folks here are planning commission members. They just went into their kind of regular business for their meeting. And now we're starting to talk about.
I'm sorry.
No, please come in.
No, it's okay.
These meetings are open to the public.
I misunderstood what it was about. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Hang out and listen
Thank you
in.
so much. I apologize. You put a sign on the door that says planning commission meeting in progress.
Well,
Come on in.
yeah.
Come on in, or not, but that way people might know.
It's part of the excitement, maybe.
Yeah.
Just get more kids. Yeah. So I'm a relatively new, I'm resident of this area. I'm currently living in Putney, and I have office space here in Brattleboro. I'm a freelance graphic designer, but I'm also an AICP certified planner. I worked for 6 years in Minneapolis and Philadelphia as a consultant, working on community planning, urban design, and community engagement projects.
We have a vacancy on the board.
I'm not a Brattleboro resident.
She's in.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, trust me, I've asked.
I'm working on that for a bit.
My name is Gabby. I moved here a little over 2 months ago from New York City. My husband and I moved here together. And I met Chrissy, which was really great. And I just came by this project and I was really interested because I have a background in the arts and community building. In New York, I worked for various nonprofits and I'm also an artist myself. So it just felt like it was really in line with a lot of my, what I'm interested in and what I believe a community should be, which is just inclusive. So just here to listen and take part. Yeah.
So Gabby, we will have an opening on the planning commission.
Oh my gosh.
And I heard you told Sharon that too. So.
Okay. All right, good to know.
I'm Felicity Rattay. I've lived here, I've worked at the same place for 21 years. So I work up in Marlboro for college. And I've been on the commission a little less than you. A little more than you, maybe 1 or 2 meetings.
And do you teach or you're?
I teach.
What do you teach?
Teach the history of art and architecture, which is what brings me here.
That was my major. Art history. Bard College.
Oh, wow.
Good place.
I'm Jess Gelter. I've been on the Planning Commission for 3 years. And I run a creative economy nonprofit over that side of the river. And over here, I wear my artist hat. I'm a performer artist.
I'm Tom Mosikowski, and I've been on the planning commission for several months. Somehow I became a town meeting member as well, remotely from Florida. Thanks, Robert Over. I don't know how we did it. That was interesting. And
Town meeting was interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
that went really long, right? They don't usually.
Yeah, it was a little long.
Yeah. But anyway, good to have a say in the decisions. And let's see, I moved here about a year and a half ago from Massachusetts. And kind of one of my goals with moving here is to get some land with a couple friends and do the homesteading agriculture thing. So kind of waiting until a decent option comes up. And I just bought a house downtown, so really need some work and kind of be involved with that for a while. And get some housemates. So that's my project at the time. Estabrook Street, that little street between canals, Lawrence and Clark and South Main.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, right in the middle of the street.
It's a cool street. My name is Kate Botland, and I've been on the planning commission for 4 or 5 years. I moved to town about 5 years ago with my husband, and we had 3 kids since we moved here. This is the youngest one so far. This is Gus. And I work as a project manager for an IT company, and we bought a house on Elliott Street, which also we're working on. Have been since we moved here.
And I'm Sue Fillion. I'm the planning director for Brattleboro. I have been working in Brattleboro since 2003, so started as the regional planning commission for several years, and I've been in the town for about 10 years, I think. 10 years at this point. So I live over there, but I spend a lot of time in Brattleboro. Children do gymnastics, and so we're here long hours downtown.
What town did you live in?
Walpole, New Hampshire.
Oh, okay.
I like how you guys don't want to say that like out loud.
Oh,
I work over there. Are these for everybody?
So-
Yes, they are.
I'll talk about that.
Yeah. Pass the bag around.
So if I could, then I'm going to turn it over to you and I will stop talking. So I met Chrissy back in February when she reached out and they were starting to plan this residency, and I was really excited about what they were going to be doing, and I came down I think in March as well, and kind of had a conversation and showed them what they've been collecting. And as we are moving into the downtown design plan where we're taking a look at the public spaces, I thought it would be a great opportunity while you're still in this space, which I'm not sure for how much longer, to have a meeting down here and have a chance for everybody to meet and to talk and see what Brattleboro Listening Project has been up to. The RFP for the downtown master plan is out. I'm expecting responses, I think April 12th, I think it is, maybe another week and a half. And then, so I'll be gathering some commissioners to help review proposals after that, but I am on vacation from the 18th through the 28th, so it might have to fall when we get back. We'll maybe do a first cut. And then, but anyway, so I just thought it was good timing to meet while they were in this space. So with that, thanks for the project.
Well, first we wanted to say thank you to all of you for coming down here, and thank you to Sue for suggesting that we host the meeting here. I have to say that when we started this project, hosting the planning commission wasn't necessarily one of the things that we had envisioned at the outset, but it turns out to be, I think, exactly the kind of event and activity that we wanted to have in this space, and sort of our very much aligned with our intentions for fostering communication and kind of having these outside the box opportunities to engage. So we're excited to have you here. I think it's really cool of all of you to come down. We don't have a really structured agenda. What we've passed out is a little summary for you to sort of peruse at your leisure. And we'll try and speak to some of this. So there's a little overview of the project. There's some bullet notes about kind of the key themes that we've heard in conversation or kind of collected from input in the space. There's some thoughts about kind of what we think the impact or value of the project is, and also just notations about where this is all going next. We're happy to take a little time to kind of give an overview of the project and share what we've been up to and some of the things that we've heard so far. But we're really hoping that this kind of in keeping in the spirit of the listening project, for this to be an open conversation, and that we can kind of just have a, you are welcome to ask questions of us, and certainly if there are topics in here that you want us to kind of go into more detail about in terms of what the conversations we're having, we're happy to do that. But we also kind of want to turn the tables on you and have a chance to ask you some of the same questions that we've been engaging in this space, and also understand a little bit more about especially some of the forward-thinking things of like what can you dream of for the future. So in your roles as planning commissioners and kind of the stewards of the long-term vision for physical development in Brattleboro, what are your hopes for the future, either as it pertains to the downtown design plan or any other long-term planning goals? So that's the non-planned plan. So I'll turn it over to Sharon. She can speak a little bit to kind of where this project started and what we've been up to.
Yeah. So back in the fall, there was kind of I guess an email that circulated that was a very informal conversation where a number of people came over to my house for brunch, and it was just to kind of take the temperature, just to sort of see who responded, but just to get a sense of what people were looking for, missing, hoping for in terms of, I guess, building relationships and spaces, both for like art making, but also just for community gathering, like what kind of spaces people were longing for. And it was just a very like, what's the word I'm looking for? It was an exciting meeting, and from there it created a like ongoing, what we were calling half-baked brunches. And they were just kind of getting together for food, sometimes with some structured agenda, and with different interests. So kind of what started with some people were really just hungry for, kind of like multifunctional spaces and multi-generational spaces for people to get together. Some were really kind of lamenting kind of the lack of affordable space and kind of the need for artist studio space. And so there are different interests represented, and sort of there was kind of a group that came out of that meeting where we were sort of focused on, what can we kind of do together in the short term as far as kind of taking up residence in kind of borrowed spaces, or and engaging with community members, around some of the questions that we were starting to ask in terms of what do people really want to see, what do they long for from the past, what would it look like if we just kind of had a space for a couple months to open up a call for proposals and see how people wanted to use that. It's, clearly in this space there's only so much room and there's only so much we can do with it. And we're point proven. We're having conversations about community mapping, about what if we had some kind of headquarters, and had a co-working space, what if people could, submit their ideas for certain workshops, bookmaking or art making or, reading clubs and so on. So we were just having a lot of exciting conversations around that. And so out of that kind of came this plan. We approached the Latches. We got permission to use the space for a couple-month period, and then sort of a number of the people who had been involved in these prior conversations and who were interested in becoming this working group, we all kind of worked together to pull together what resources we had and kind of map out the space, which we started fairly bare bones, and it's been accumulating over time. And I think our interest was really seeing what the accumulation also looked like. So seeing what happened when we just kind of opened up the doors and the possibility for people, and just to sort of play a facilitating role if someone said, I really want to do this or that, and to kind of help kind of workshop that idea with them. But then also just to have kind of a space where people could engage with certain questions and kind of seeing sort of what accumulated over time. And to have something that sort of at the tail end of the project, which is where we are now, where we could really kind of look at everything together and kind of figure out how we want to like synthesize and sort of what we see as like a next phase for this project. So it won't be in this space anymore, but we are kind of thinking through some of those ideas now as far as like what could the future of this project be too, as a community engagement tool or as a program or as something that's nomadic. But really it was to inform ourselves too of the things that we're starting to hear, and so the framing questions kind of offered some inroads, I guess, into that. And along the way we became new board members of the Arts Council as well, which is awesome. And it kind of came with some like there will be some, I guess, decluttering as we understand sort of like what how we want to move forward. And we're kind of looking at this project as kind of this means of informing kind of what our role might be as this future Arts Council. Like, what are we learning? What are really people pointing to about what their needs or hopes are? That's kind of where we are.
We wanted to give all of you a chance to walk around the room a little bit more and actually read some of what we've collected. And I can kind of point out just a general map of where things are. So these are some of the early questions that we started with, and we had sort of open hours earlier on in the residency in the middle of March, where people could come in during gallery walk or just during the day and engage in a variety of different activities, so they could answer these sort of very simple open-ended prompts. And we didn't want to get too specific about these are like art-specific questions, which is why, because I think as a baseline, we did want to come from a fairly positive perspective and recognize that there's a lot of value and attachment to places in the community, even though kind of our initial meeting was talking about like what's missing and kind of where do we have needs. We also wanted to recognize that there is a lot of community and there is a lot of places where people do feel kind of connected and nourished. So that's what a lot of this is intended to surface, as well as kind of like forward-looking goals for the future. We also had Katie Bachler, who's a local arts educator, lead a number of arts workshops for kids and for grown-ups, and invited people in to make maps, either kind of maps of places that they are important to them or favorite places in the community, or maps of walks or experiences in town, whether they're real or imagined. So that's kind of what a lot of this information is. And then we had a number of these question cards that had more specific prompts, some of which are more related to like what's your creative practice and where do you feel like you may need more support, and what could you do with this space. So if it makes sense, we can take some time to give people a chance to walk around and ask questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You might have said this and I missed it, but this big bear that tried to land on me, what was what happened here? What was that?
What happened?
Okay, so these were the responses are below each prompt.
Yeah, and there's some stuff that's off topic from the.
Oh, sure.
From the questions, which is
expected.
yeah.
I remember that.
Which is okay.
So this thing about town meeting is sort of, this is what I want, this is my agenda items for town meeting? Is that what that is? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's all one person.
That is all one person.
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
And let's see if we can guess who that person is.
Yeah,
I think people might know who that person is. But at the same time, I think that was kind of our, that was the unknown as well too. As we opened up the doors and had public events, it was like, how, you never know, and how do you really create a space where people feel like they can share what's on their mind.
Interesting. So this was always there and people came and wrote what they wanted to on it?
Yeah, and so, some of the activities we did weren't actively about this, whatever's on the walls. There were people who came in and did like bookmaking workshops, but all of this was always available to people if they wanted to come in, or if we were just doing kind of open co-working, we might get someone coming in off the street and asking, what's this about, and providing a little bit of input here and there.
And the written stuff are really just, like kind of portions of the kinds of conversations that were happening here that weren't necessarily documented in the same way,
So what's the post-it note pieces?
Oh, so one of the things that we also invited people to do was just come in and host meetings in a space. So we actually had our last Arts Council board meeting here just like a week ago. So this was a brainstorm for thinking about what's the vision, future vision for that organization.
We also had a class, there was a class from Landmark College, there was like a community engagement course. That's not the exact title of the course, but it was really cool. Yeah, they came for one of the art making, bookmaking activities.
Yeah.
I spent
I'm assuming that's what they mean, and that's the background for them. They're going to choose the best. How you feel serious in this?
Right.
There's some cute ones. I like them.
At least downtown, so you can see that. We had the across from the Windham restaurant, just that kind of remote area. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to have open space.
The river comes up like a lot on this one.
It does come up a lot.
It's owned by the town. That
Yeah.
up there is part
Yeah.
of
What part
Yeah.
going to the river?
Part of the
Yes,
project.
please.
Yeah. Basically.
All I've seen is a big rock.
The one about the trees. You guys can do, maybe this is the same or something.
Oh, like that kind of opinion.
Yeah, on the side of the building, actually, trees and meadows and pieces of photographs is a collage. So there was really a lot that was out like, it's interesting to hear in the middle of winter.
Right,
Like
right.
walking for the outdoors.
In the river, there is a actual sculpture on the side of the transportation building, which you may not recognize, but it's like silver things that are like around. So there's some larger kind of art projects to talk about the relationship with the river. And I don't know, I know Felicity worked. Hey Felicity.
Yes, ma'am.
When you were working on removing the trees by the river,
Yeah.
was that with
That was-
Andy Wasserman and Elizabeth?
Yes,
Billings
that
for
was that was the From the River to the
Yeah,
River
yeah,
project.
yeah. So it was partly to provide that, like here's the river, like some
Mm.
did you visual aspects.
I just went and
Oh,
I
you
went
went
to the
there.
volunteer
Wondered if
day.
that's
Oh,
just
okay.
gonna be an
That
open,
poison ivy.
grassy
Exactly.
area, definitely,
Yeah.
which there really isn't really downtown. The town common doesn't feel like it's kind of hard, so that seems to be overlooking and I thought you probably had just like a view, but
Yeah.
because it had a lot of interest in people who know about it and everything.
Yeah.
People who come to town and see it's cool.
Right, the other interesting thing is that now the bridge project. We're gonna have pedestrian, no, we're gonna have pedestrian access to the properties again.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, yeah, we'll have the
Shows.
only pedestrian
Shows.
access. So there's like, I was like,
Yeah.
whoa.
like his restaurant. Yeah, I like that too.
I mean, I was initially maybe that gets redeveloped.
Looks so very
Yeah.
That's what I do.
And then there was a discussion connecting hiking trails and then over the railroad bridge and the land over it.
I didn't notice during the summer like that little park at all, but when I've seen it in the off season, no more than some stuff there and stuff.
Yeah, there is things like it needs some help.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I wonder, what is the, was that a
It's
typewriter or
It's
yours?
just
Just
a lot of
The funny thing is that
Yeah, see, I never
Really
saw
want
it.
it,
Yeah, right.
right? So it's sort of,
Yeah, this one's really cute.
but again, it's literally.
Oh, and here's the bird.
Yeah.
Besides walking along or on the railroad tracks, right? Or
It is the monument.
So.
But that's sponsored
Really
by.
like that.
Big one.
Yeah. It'd be great if there was.
I agree.
You're just like, I love Danny.
There's the parking lot there.
And then there's a lot on the retreat. River Lakes and retreat, ice skating on the retreat meadows. So how many people do you suppose live here? How many?
So we don't have a great head count, it's given the nature of some of the events where people are just like gallery walk, people are coming and going.
Yeah.
I would guess it's like more than 50 and less than 200.
For gallery walk?
Oh, no, just for all.
total? Oh, yeah, I mean, I think the gallery walks, like, last one, I kind of counted. We tried periodically, just as we were in here in the space, to kind of try to make note, in that way, like, some people, like, what the numbers seemed like. I think the last one, there was like somewhere between 40 and 50. So gallery walk definitely saw a different level of foot traffic. For other activities like the RT and talks, like I think those were more like handfuls.
It's a metaphor, right?
Oh, I get you. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's cool, actually.
The first time, the first art making event was, I think that was during like school break, and the River Gallery like brought a bunch of kids down, and there
It
was
was also during when they were doing the
Dollar
dollar movies.
Dollar
here.
movies,
And so
yeah.
we timed it so it was as the movies were letting out, we just had the door open, and so we just like pulled people in as they were on their way to lunch. So there were, a fair amount of traffic through the door.
I think we will, like, at sort of the tail end, kind of do our best to kind of go back to each particular event and generally approximate sort of what those numbers were. But yeah, it was a little challenging just based on the nature of it. I think there's some ability to, like, get to some general number.
I have a question. How did you feel like the representation was from like the different groups in Brattleboro in terms of the responses you got? And
Yeah.
I'm curious too about like non-Brattleboro residents. Like it looks like most of the people here are like really intimately acquainted with Brattleboro. But I wondered if during gallery walks you were getting people who were just visiting like, hey, what's going on here? Here's what I think of Brattleboro.
There was a smattering of that, I would say. And, we have Facebook page, Instagram, and so we're both kind of like posting and then resharing, some of the activities. And so,
In terms of representation, again, because this isn't like a rigorous survey where we're really taking demographic information, it is hard to assess. I do think that in part because of there were sort of like 6 principal organizers who are all, I guess like mid-30s to mid-40s. So to the extent that influenced the network of who was being connected to the project, even though everything was, public. I'd say there probably was something of an age skew in comparison to the other activities that happen in town. But the gallery walk, that was pretty broad. And then also because we offer a lot of free art making for families, that just draws in a ton of young people. So we did get a lot of kids and parents in this space too.
Oh, that's nice.
And I think that's one of the things that I find really exciting is because when we've done, outreach, we're generally not getting that younger demographic, whether the 30s, 40s, the kids, it tends to skew older,
Yeah.
for sure.
But because we were fixed here in this space and not, and we
Yeah,
talked
it's
at
not
some
just a
point about
public
like going
meeting.
out, then obviously there's the demographic of who's in downtown and who comes here, who wants to come here for either for an event or just like who's passing by on the street. So that certainly was limiting. It sounds like they're
Starting the movie, I
Downton
guess.
Abbey.
We get a sound.
It was lovely. It sounds like the theme music to
It
Downton
might
Abbey.
be testing.
That's really cool that you got.
Oh, right,
that
there's
you got
Downton
engagement
Abbey.
from young people and young families, and I'm really excited about getting more out of what younger people think of town and what they value, because Vermont, obviously, like, they talk a lot about how we're losing young people away, and I also feel like young people who stay here and who are artists or, whatever their thing is, are going to stay and be really invested, and it's just, obviously, I like young people. So I think that's awesome that you got participation.
And it was, and we did get participation from younger people, and we also kind of heard sort of what the challenges are for younger people,
Yeah.
artists in general, but also younger artists, and kind of related to some of the other community issues, that people are grappling with.
And I can vouch for your effective marketing and networking. I had no idea what you guys were doing, and Sarah saw an Instagram post and was like, "What's this?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And we're like, "Let's go check it out." So that is you guys. so it's working.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, and it speaks to another thing I think that kind of came out of this too was kind of volunteerism, as that's kind of comes up and everyone is, volunteering in many different ways, and sort of what that looks like also with a, residency project with kind of even just a short-term cap, but, even within a short window of time, sort of like the ways in which, it is still, there are still limits to what is possible when you don't actually have paid staff or can assess efficiently, because that requires a different kind of strategy and resources, than we can offer, just where we're at now.
So what are some of the things that you heard from people in terms of the challenges and what they need and what they're hoping for?
Well, I think in terms of young families, like when we did some of the art making activities, there were parents who were just like, "Oh, this project is really interesting." And I think this idea of like there's something about connecting people and being new, especially we talked to a lot of people who work on newcomers who moved here with young children and just found it difficult to like integrate themselves into whether it was like a parenting community or just sort of meeting other young people. And that was a sort of like a general comment. In terms of like younger artists, there definitely was a consistent storyline that with the loss of some affordable artist space in downtown, and if you're familiar with what happened in the People's Building, and the artists in those spaces losing their space just this past week, I think. There is this real sense of kind of a crisis or a shift where it's like there are people who feel like this is not a welcoming community for
Or is it
us.
shifting to office space or something?
I think it's shifting to residential,
Oh,
but I'm not
residential.
sure.
Which building are you talking
Above
about?
above Windham,
Windham.
Windham Movement Apparel.
Carol Wolf.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those rates were really low.
They were low, and it was also,
It's a good deal.
from what I understand from folks who have been in that, in those spaces for a while, that it also was like a real hub of activity. There was a community there, and people who had a certain like collegiality and were drawn to that space for that reason. It's one thing to find a space that's affordable, a space that allows you to, make noise or, do like work with dirtier materials or whatever it
Blow
is.
bubbles off the roof or hang out on the stoop.
Right, but also to be able to do that with your peers. And I don't think that that's sort of like a unique, that's a story that's been repeating itself in downtown. And then also at this point, there's kind of very few sort of like small performance venues left in downtown. A lot of it's kind of shifted over to like Stone Church and larger spaces. And so kind of that like underground culture performance spaces is also being lost.
Night culture.
Night culture, and I guess like the low stakes like spaces where you could show something and it's messy and you don't have to make money on it, but it's like there's less of that in the downtown happening now. Do you know of like where shows are? I remember periods in the People's Building, like post Tinderbox and so on.
I think of like the tinderbox and stuff like that, and like one of the biggest upsets is losing young people that are motivated and doing really awesome things in this community, and that started a long time ago.
Yes,
So that's a huge concern of mine, so like you mentioned, like losing the People's Building, and it's like, it's been happening for a while.
It's been happening for a while, and so I think that there's certainly like a subset of, younger Brattleboro who are now maybe less young, but, who were here, and I think there's a certain trauma of like loss, and people who are, fewer people who are here. But then kind of like, I guess we kind of heard at times of like certain rifts, in terms of, even though we had a positive tone and we're forward thinking, kind of this like, as people were revisiting places from the past, or like spaces where people did get together, or even places that they currently value, did sometimes surface kind of what's no longer here, kind of like so there are things around that came up along the way.
That's interesting, because I almost wonder if you're like, if you would get different responses from like different demographics in the community, right? Because I don't actually, from my perspective here, I don't see us losing those spaces. I see them shifting, right? So 118 Elliott Street used to be a laundromat.
Right.
And that's providing space for all kinds of...
It's a space, but it comes with a rental. It's not like a super flexible space. So there is a shifting that's happening, so it's not all loss. But I guess we're hearing about the ways that even with new spaces, those are not necessarily working for everyone. So I think it's very true that depending on your demographic, like you're going to hear different things. And that was kind of part of it.
So is there like I said, I've just been here a year and a half, but is there kind of a general sense of like gentrification happening to some degree here? Because I know that with people who talk about the economy here, they just say it's just stagnating, it's just kind of even. So I think gentrification happens in tandem with more money and more economy. So
we have older building stock in downtown, and so like with Tinderbox and with this People's Building, like that's also part of it's. I mean that's what gentrification is. It's like someone comes in and wants to redevelop it to keep that building in active use. There's some something of a good intention there, but the consequence is that you have to raise rents to be able to pay for that improvement, and so then that space no longer is affordable. So then there's no protection.
At higher rates.
Right, that.
Or they're improving it to get
Yes,
higher rates.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Or even
Rents are already high.
So I do think that's part of what is, what we're seeing, and I think this is also like, when we talk about, I mean, you mentioned if we talk to a different demographic, we get different answers, and I think we've also heard from a lot of people who felt like, I'm happy here. I'm a creative person, and I feel like I have what I need. I have access to like great art institutions, and I can take classes at River Gallery, and I can, if I want to be able to show my work, I can. And so there are people for whom the arts community, is serving them. But I think one narrative we've been talking about a lot is that this is an arts community that was built by a particular generation of Brattleboro residents, and they've developed these incredible institutions, that are really thriving in a lot of respects. And if you look at like the places where people said they hold some value, a lot of that are these like bedrock arts institutions. but I think it also has created some division. So there's sort of this natural process of like those, what maybe started out as more like grassroots organizations have grown up into these like established organizations, and so you've lost that ecosystem of smaller things.
But there are still quite a lot of grassroots, organizations in this area too, but I think I've heard in different circles and in different ways kind of the silo effect, which, working in the arts as well, it's, you hear about that constantly, and just like I'm just kind of doing my thing, and it's like even where you have, other people in your field or network, it's just, sometimes, on the one hand, there's kind of this great opportunity for collaboration. On the other hand, you have organizations that are not always talking to each other or making plans, but like not really in alignment or, with any knowledge of like, oh my gosh, you're right down the street and you're doing the same thing. Or we could be talking to each other.
And that's been one of the, I think, the takeaways of this project for me at least, which is like, we kind of went into this without a particular expectation or particular goal in mind. We're like, these are questions and conversations that we're interested in pursuing, and we also wanted to see what happens when we give up this space for people's program. This really nice thing has happened where we've been able to help make some of those connections, and a lot of it's been somewhat serendipitous that we couldn't necessarily have planned, or like, let's sit this person and this person down in the room. But in the course of these different events, and particularly some of like more intimate, conversations around this table, I feel like some of those things have started to spark. And so it's sort of like just recognizing that the more you kind of flex this muscle of conversation and bringing people together and holding space for these conversations to happen, you're creating those opportunities for connections to occur. And it's not to say it's not happening elsewhere organically in town, but it's just something that we're observing, and I think we've got a positive response. It's like nourishing and encouraging for people to experience.
I think kind of like related to that and kind of like turning it back to you, sort of like from what you're kind of taking in about this project and the kinds of questions we've been asking and how we've been connecting with different community members. Like, how do you feel that not is relevant, but it's just like in what ways does that either match or connect with the kinds of questions that you're asking, or kind of like the work ahead of you in the next couple of years? I think that was a question that we had of, in what ways does a project like this or some of the things that start to percolate from it, how are they informative or helpful, as a means of connecting with people, what's already happening?
Yeah, I would say.
Do you think you know everything that's happening?
No, in terms of, we're somewhat, there's some long-standing planning procedures, but we really haven't gone out and done public engagement in quite some time. We did the parking study in 2016, 2017. The survey was really well responded to, and it was open for people. It was a survey monkey, so it's hard to kind of track everything inside, and response rates and stuff. But we still think it was close to like 800 non-duplicated responses, so of both Brattleboro and other people in town. So, that's probably one of the more successful outreach efforts that we had, and everybody wants to talk about parking. But we did get into some of the safety aspects of downtown and that as well. But beyond that, we really haven't been out to kind of take a pulse, which is why I find this so interesting. But I think, we're definitely moving into that and are looking to have an inclusive and a diverse engagement public. So it's kind of hitting this area that we haven't hit before, and just
And you're not entirely sure at this point what that might look like, or you've already started some
No.
of those?
No, we're out for a consultant, but we can
gonna say the downtown plan, I think, has an element of having a pop-up or maybe possibly permanent creative placemaking element to it, as well as, it's primarily looking at spatial design and how people use and interact with and sort of experience the downtown. And I think that really ties into, people's experience of place and space and the ability to provide spaces where the community can gather, which it sounds like is one of the needs.
Absolutely.
You all could potentially submit a bid for the RFP.
The listening project.
I don't know, maybe.
I think it's also in terms of the planning commission, when we have reached out to the community, it's often like in a very focused effort, right? So it's like there was work around the Whetstone corridor, or there's work around the parking, but we haven't, like that, the way you reach out in a way where you're trying to actually find the intersections is a really different process. And I think just because of the nature of like the work that needs to be done from the planning commission, it's an interesting question, like how you prioritize that in your plan, right?
And who you involve in that too,
Yeah.
because those are complicated needs, and like you need a different representation.
Right. When we did the update of the town plan, I felt really strongly about getting some more voices in the room. But all I could do was invite the people that I knew, right? It wasn't like so I invited about 5 people, and I think some of them sent in letters and some of them showed up to our meeting. But it was difficult to listen at that point because the work had gone so far. And I think that, there are some wonderful things that you're doing that could help us even start to listen earlier before we really launch into stuff and drafts and.
I agree. Yeah, I would love, this is just me editorializing, but that's why I asked about engagement from different groups, because I would love to hear more about how different groups value Brattleboro, or about what they aren't getting out of Brattleboro. And I'm looking at your demographic, right? And I would love to hear that. I try to hear for those things, but I'm in like my own kind of echo chamber with my own weird people I know. And, we mostly just violently, we violently agree with each other, And it's it would be really great to have more of that earlier in the process. And it sounds like you guys have done what you've done, and it's gotten a good response from people, coming and wanting to just like throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. And I think it's great.
And just making yourselves available and accessible for conversation.
Yeah.
Because I think that connection piece is so important. I think, based on our conversation at the February, at the March meeting, and I don't know if you saw the TED Talk, but, having people feel connected to their community. I think what struck me on some of this and just other stuff I've been reading is the poverty rates in Vermont are, just increasing and pretty staggering. And so having people feel connected to their communities, they can get what they need from that if they're missing from other places.
So, I'm in my various hats. A lot to throw into the circle here, but one thing is, interestingly, like you got the Instagram thing and knew this existed. I had no idea in the past 2 months, and that may be because I'm like focused on my work, and you know what I mean. But in terms of, and I'd be interested to know if Frederick, my partner, who knows everything that's going on, if he knew, he probably would be like, I can help you. Duh. But so I don't know if like somehow the communication, like which parts of the community, if it was me or different demographic. The other thing So I guess a couple of other things I wanted to bring up. One is Connecticut River Conservancy partnered with the Vermont Performance Lab last year on this Confluence project, right, which touched a bunch of points in this community, but also other communities. And one of the interesting things that came out of that is we did this community paddle, which I think I now understand provided some of that free, open community space for people to come together, because it was like overwhelming response to it. So that's been intriguing to me. And I just submitted a grant today for funding specifically to do this kind of community engagement in Brattleboro. Along those lines, but also in conjunction with the From the River to the River artists who are also have some plans to work in the community in the next couple of years. So, you know, I think there's like one silo, I hate to say it that way, of the Planning Commission and the work we do, but then there are these other groups that are actually also doing that work in our community, and so figuring out how you connect the dots between all those groups. I mean, partly it's like we're gonna wait for funding, and then we're like, hey, Sue, you know?
I mean, well, the funding is serious. I mean, like you said, with volunteers. I mean, it's no different for the town. Sometimes we have to wait for the funding.
Yeah.
Prioritize something.
For me, I'm so new to the planning. Sorry.
That's okay. No.
For me, I'm so new to the planning commission. I'm still like learning my place in all this and learning how it works and the process and stuff. But like when it comes to like inclusivity, you know, that's a focus of mine personally. When it comes to like, you know, like rent stabilization or affordable housing or affordable space or whatever, you know, obviously we need that desperately. You know, like we're turning into like Austin or Boston or Seattle or Portland, and people are being pushed out. You know, with gentrification or you know, whatever. Whenever it comes to arts and like economy, I'm incredibly interested in that. You know, we can't just rely on that. You know, we have to look at the big picture. I am learning about like how, you know, planning commission in relation to like what folks like you are doing. You know, I think the link is having people like me like on the planning commission. You know, that is more aware of this. But I don't know. Like I'm learning about how the planning commission can work with you. You know?
I mean, the link is also, I think, in the community engagement piece. That seems like it's been kind of integral to this particular project and sort of whatever it becomes.
Yep.
But that also sounds like, you know, you're talking about as well of like the ways that kind of opens new doors for kind of taking pulses and I don't know, even just the fun aspect, you know, of it, you know, that it's not just like a focused question about, you know, parking necessarily or, but I do want to say too that like this was a lot of like throwing things up on the wall and kind of seeing what stuck. But also following this, you know, we're kind of entering this period of like reflection and organizing material. And, you know, one of the things in terms of this Friday gallery walk, you know, we'll be in this space. And, you know, we also want to maybe kind of reframe some of the prompts as we've had them into either more pointed prompts, you know, with opportunities for people to, you know, in essence, like contribute to, I think, what would potentially become either like a zine of the project or kind of a new set of, you know, questions and responses that then can be circulated in different ways, or that might, you know, serve a number of different interests, you know, whether it's, you know, being distributed widely in spaces in town, you know, where that extend beyond like the measures we took to try and get the word out about this project, you know, including like a press release and things in the Reformer and the Commons, but, you know, we haven't really had the wherewithal to kind of like keep at, you know, sort of sending weekly listings or updates or editorials or all that. I mean, so yeah, it's just, you know, it is an interesting question in terms of like where and the how. For me, like Facebook, it's all kind of like hit or miss because I'm not constantly on it. So I think, you know, it does kind of beg the question, and I hear it in so many ways of like how do you really have an inclusive, informed process? And it's just like so much about like getting your tentacles out and then kind of seeing sort of where they come together and being in public spaces together and less obvious spaces together.
Yeah, and I know, and maybe it was Kathy who said this, that but, as someone who's worked on planning projects and engagement, I think the places where engagement has the most benefit within the context of a planning process is where you already have a somewhat organized and engaged constituency. And so where the infrastructure for people to have those conversations already exists, whether that's like having a very active planning commission that does a really great job of like putting all those technicals out to the community, or having a civic organization that works really closely with the community. And in small towns, especially, that can work really well. An organization that plays a big role in doing outreach and where they're funded, to do specifically that kind of work. You have that apparatus already in place. And so when the project comes along, when the plan comes along, it's not like a scramble to be like, we need to form a steering committee, or we need to get all these people, we need to get people to a public meeting. You're able to kind of use some of those communication channels that already exist organically. And so, I guess that's just me sort of advocating for thinking about how those structures can be fostered. This is a volunteer effort, it's not sustainable.
As a volunteer effort.
As a volunteer effort. And so certainly we want to continue a conversation about how the listening project can have a life beyond this and seek out funding mechanisms so that we can continue to do different kinds of activities. And I think the community paddle, that's something that we talked about. I didn't put on this list, but we talked about getting out of this space and going and doing field trips. And so the desire to bring people together to learn about other parts of the community, whether that's natural spaces or other organizations, doing community walking tours, things like that.
It'd be interesting,
different social
it'd be interesting
services.
to do a temporal thing there too, and actually really specifically talk to older people who live in the community a long time to find out what do you think happened here over the past 50 years?
Yeah,
Talk to
absolutely.
this guy youngly and this guy youngly.
Yeah, exactly.
Those two have a lot to say about
Do
the
programming
direction.
that's specifically about intergenerational communication, but these are all great, exciting ideas.
Yeah.
With we only have so much time and energy, and we want to be
So
mindful of people's time and burnout.
burnout, yeah. I'm very concerned. I've brought up burnout with you before. The Northampton Arts Council, have you done any research on them? They have paid employees. Do you know where the money comes from? I don't know, I'm asking.
I think
How-
there's money in their structure.
They have membership structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is relevant, but there's actually a lot of focused foundation money that comes into Windham County and Brattleboro specifically. And if you move into, I think I was in my feverish stupor the other night sleeping, this occurred to me. I was like, wow, we're actually quite lucky because if you, from my perspective, I'm moving through a lot of the other river towns. And we are able to, we have a pretty vibrant economy, and I was actually wondering, is it because we have this specific foundation support in our area?
Except 1, 2, and 3. That's just my simplified.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe. The other places have exits too, you know what I mean? And you can tell that it's different as you move, poverty levels are different. Anyway, just thinking.
I think, I told you, Chrissy, and you maybe covered it too, Jess, when the NECAPA conference was in Portsmouth that year, there was the Portsmouth Listens group, which is, you guys have kind of been focused on community and the arts in particular. But when Portsmouth was working on their town plan years ago, they struck up this partnership with the Portsmouth Listens group, I think they came out of New Hampshire, UNH, and they have basically done training throughout Vermont for these, throughout New Hampshire for these. I think they are volunteers, I'm not sure that they're paid. But they can kind of be mobilized when, in this case, when the municipality is undertaking a project. So I think in Portsmouth and others, something with the schools. There's been different towns that have tackled race and diversity, and volunteers are trained and kind of can go out and do lots of different topics. And so I was just thinking, that could be useful for Brattleboro, kind of building on the work that you've done, because I do think that there are people in the community that are, would, more volunteers that might be interested in doing this kind of work on whatever the topic may be. Just as a way to kind of continue the work that you've done, but obviously it would be finding the training and doing this money.
How do we find
There's,
that money?
Well, also I wanted to bring up the SEDS project descriptions, and I noticed when looking at the arts community and the sort of the plan for that is that it's the only SEDS project that is neither given any funding or staff time. And I don't know if all the SEDS projects have been approved yet, as they are, or if there's still time for comment and recommendations, but
You checking statewide?
no, just,
For the Windham Bennington area.
yeah.
I don't know that they're approved yet. I don't think I've seen it.
I
But
saw
I'm
a
not sure
draft.
where they are in the process.
That's like projects related to the arts and creative economy, or?
That is community economic development
Strategy.
strategies. So is it the Windham Regional Commission or a joint?
I think BBCC and
But when you're saying that the only part that's not funded is.
So
is
they have
the
a
arts.
lot of different specific projects in manufacturing and
Yeah.
different sectors of the economy, but arts is the only one without any funding put towards it and without any staff time.
That's
And
So
the
that's a
staff
great
time-
like.
In
The
sense.
staff
Okay.
time would be the BDCC staff, or would it be the WRC staff? What would be the
It's
staff?
BDCC
It would be
and
BDCC,
then, would it be
okay.
Bennington County staff too? Like if the sets is,
I think besides.
well, I think this is the first time that the SEDS is kind of a Southern Vermont SEDS. This might be the first time it's taken on Bennington County as well. So
What's the question? I can't follow.
That's not a question, it's sort of
Okay.
like
There's no
a
question.
opportunity for advocacy and change, like very specifically is changing that one element in the SEDS document, that says arts aren't worthy.
so there's no projects that are prioritized for
Oh,
art.
there's a project, it's just not given any funding or staff time. It basically says if a volunteer steps forward to do this, that's
I'm not
great.
sure any of the SEDS projects have funding.
There are different mechanisms in there for either loans or staff time or, different sorts of recommendations or grant allocations that are.
And I think there's one conversation that's happened in this, through the listening project and also as part of this kind of like rethinking of the Arts Council is about the impact and value of arts and creative community. And there is such an emphasis put on arts as an economic driver. And to the extent that that's been quantified, I think it is important to kind of advance awareness of that value. But I also think it kind of draws some attention away from all of the other sort of harder to quantify ways that arts contribute to community. And I think the one thing that we have heard a little bit of pushback about is like, well, show me the job creation connected to the arts. Like that's what ultimately a lot of this economic development money relies on, is kind of this link and demonstrable proof. And so that's sort of like one arena of funding that's harder to tap into. But I do think we're trying to kind of shift. We're talking about how do you shift that conversation away from just those purely economic metrics, which are still important, but also talking about kind of the contribution to quality of life and the impact on social infrastructure and relationship building, and like creating a sense of this being like a welcoming, supportive community. And there are ways, and Sharon and I have been talking about this. There are ways of quantifying that impact as well. So that's something we kind of want to.
I'm curious with that is, I don't know if you engaged people when they came in here around that. Maybe I'm just like living in this bubble because I see the connection. I get it. And I know, you know, probably at the municipal level it might feel unsupportive, but I think we've been for years, you know, with maybe select boards whose priorities were roads, police, fire. And I don't mean that in a bad way, it's just like, okay, and now there seems to be kind of a shift with the way the community is thinking and maybe where they're prioritizing. So I think that maybe at the municipal level, there's a little bit of, you know, tension of where is that line. So I guess, do people that come in here feel that the arts were unappreciated, or there was that people didn't value them for their economic benefit? Did you come across that at all?
I don't think I came across that too much. I think, you know, there was definitely some, certainly appreciation for like places that exist, and as well as I think people noted a lot of like the riverfront and natural resources that included like organizations, arts organizations, and ways that people kind of connect through the arts. So I think there was at least some kind of belief people had, you know, that the arts had value. I would guess that they also, we weren't specifically asking, you know, the question of like, do you feel like, you know, the arts have economic value as well? Because, I mean, I come from a place where I know they do.
Right.
I know they do. And there's lots of data. It's like the data is there. I'm not so keen on that argument. I'm definitely more in that like social infrastructure camp. And so I think most of the people who came through probably had some balance of like awareness that like of the arts opportunities that were already here, you know, that they were important for the community, both on economic value, but also in terms of like why Brattleboro is important to them.
I'm thinking of like, I don't know that I can articulate this. You know, we had this, at the beginning of this conversation, we had a conversation about the difference between like, you know, having access to studio space and those kind of like workshop areas, and then the process of organizations moving into like, you could say like a more sophisticated, larger format, where they then become an economic driver for the community. But simultaneously, that is, to a certain extent, gentrification, right? So if you're talking about how communities come together, and you're simultaneously talking about art as the driver of that, are you alienating some community members, right? Who don't perceive the way they come together as having anything to do with art. Like maybe it's around potlucks or ice skating on the meadows, or, you know, I saw this crazy picture from like 1926, the river was frozen, and there were people out on the river right there in front of the island. They had driven their cars out and they were ice skating, and it's like that was the, you know, hundreds of people. Like, so that was the meeting place. And so I think there's a tension or question here about like, especially given that so much of the comments up here have to do with the tension around poverty in our communities, like how are you accessing across that divide? You know, because I'm thinking of the SEDS, right, and where you're like, what economy kind of and why, you know, why do you focus on different parts of it? And I don't know. And it's also for myself, right, for my own work, I'm often finding like trying to figure out who you're talking to and how you're talking to them and where you're showing up to have those conversations is profoundly hard and profound, you know? So if I call a meeting, a certain set of the community come. Like if I go fishing, it's a different set, right? Like, you know, hiking with my kid, different set of people you're into, you know? So it's, that's just been something I'm struggling with, is like also trying to figure out like how you cross those boundaries and really access the knowledge and the, I don't know, the history and the perception of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see it as sort of the complicated work of sort of like getting also like liaisons of various communities, like connected in a way to like share what the language is, you know, and share what the concerns are and this and that. I mean, it's hard to be everywhere, and it's hard to kind of like reformulate, you know, across communities and populations. It's definitely in terms of like next phase for the listening project. I think a recurring theme is coming up in terms of like, you know, how it would look like if we were a nomadic, if we could partner with like social service agencies and sort of be in different spaces where different conversation is happening, you know, or different access to conversations are happening. And yeah, and I think if you're talking to like arts leaders or something like that, I keep hearing sort of like the economic argument over and over and over again. And yeah, I don't know, it's hard, it's kind of tiresome in a way because it
Right,
does
try to like explain that to a
these-
farmer, because they're like, I don't
I
give
do
a shit,
think-
you know, like.
I do think that with the arts, what's challenging about the arts in particular is the elitism and the community engagement. Like, I think having come here from New York City, I was immediately attracted to this because it was interdisciplinary and different people from the community could be welcomed here. And having worked for organizations that are very elite and then some where it's the total opposite, I feel like my interest is definitely this kind of space where both can come together. And I feel like Brattleboro, I have been really surprised moving here. I've only been here for like a little over 2 months, but as an artist, I have found it very welcoming, and as a creative community, I have found it really welcoming. So I think that there is a need for this, and seeing it being lost in New York and then coming here has been powerful for me, because in New York, working in the arts, it's just one, artists are leaving. Two, so many nonprofits are just struggling to get funding, so they're not actually doing the work they maybe really want to do. Or there's a lot of levels to it. But I feel like a place like Brattleboro being smaller, it has so much potential to create a really truly thriving arts community. And I think I really am seeing that, and I think that this project can drive that forward and hopefully mend those gaps within, you know, farmer and person who works in insurance or whatever. And what's cool about Brattleboro, I've noticed too, is that there's so many different professions in one place. Like, I went to the town meeting and like listened, and it was cool to just hear all these different people talking in the same place and having their voice, and it not being so compartmentalized as I found in New York City. That happened too. I'm not trying to put New York City too much, I love it, but you know, just certain issues that I had noticed living there that I was hoping to see something new here.
I think town meeting is a good place for that.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
I feel like New York City.
Yeah. I'm sure it can
No. What I would say is, I wish it was happening all the time in all the decision, you know, making. But you know, sometimes, you know, that's the place where people show up, and that's fine. But it was like there's all these steps along the way too that you can be engaged, and part of that's on us, municipal officials or board members and stuff. But and sometimes, you know, it's just going to be the way it is with outreach too.
Of course, yeah.
It's neat to see that.
I just want to be mindful of the time. It says 7:35.
Do you have a little bit extra time if we wrap up at 8, or do you want to?
That's fine with me. I want to do service.
I was wondering, I mean, obviously, your listening project is going to kind of continue in some way for maybe a little bit of time. If there was something, I mean, I don't want to put it down to one thing, but you know, as we move forward with our downtown design plan, is there something that you've picked out that needs more work? You know, that you've gotten comments on that you think that we should be aware of and kind of move. I mean, I can see that the natural resources and outdoor spaces and that kind of stuff is important.
Access to the river, big deck,
Access to the river is huge, and it would be.
I feel so validated.
I went down there waiting for a trail, and I was like, oh, like I was looking for.
Oh, the little-
It's such a
To, like, get in
no-brainer
there,
to
yeah.
Sorry, I totally cut you off.
No, I'm just wondering, I mean, is there something that you would want to point out to us that, you know, we should maybe pick up and run with. There'll be lots of things to run with.
I think access certainly has come up in terms of the riverfront. I think there were some very specific conversations about the art museum potential redevelopment project and the impact that could have on the riverfront access in both positive and potentially negative ways that could be transformative. And this wasn't necessarily tied to the downtown master plan opportunity, but my thought was connecting those, making sure those pieces feel really connected and aligned, and that the downtown master plan can, in the event that project, that expansion goes through, that it provides really strong guidance for the how the development relates to the public realm, and trying to seek those opportunities to have that come together in alignment with what the public wants for that waterfront space.
Can you give us examples?
Well, like in thinking about the redesign of Bridge Street, well, I guess that's more of a public project, but certainly that has a relationship to the art museum properties. But you know, the scale of development that happens on the riverfront. So what is that building?
The arch.
Right. So the buildings that are immediately adjacent to the water. What relationship does that have? I mean, from our conversations with Sarah Freeman at the art museum, she was really talking about how their intention really is to expand. You know, that they see it as an opportunity to increase access to the river, which is a generally like very positive intention. But from a like design guideline perspective, like what is the kind of concrete and from the planning commission and development review board's perspective, like what's enforceable in terms of guiding or that like character language that that helps that museum project be successful and responsive to what the community wants, because I have heard a lot of different perspectives, positive and negative, about the opportunity there, and it would be great if it was all positive. But
I mean, it seems like the museum has it's a different constituency from the constituency that you guys seem like you're talking to. I mean, which is, it's a sort of, I mean, because they do a lot of fundraising, it's a sort of out of town, not out of town as in people who live in the periphery with the more expensive properties and access to a good deal more wealth, since they need expensive funding. So there is that. I mean, we used the word gentrification, and I'm curious, I mean, this is an era of absolute emptiness in my knowledge, but what you were talking about, economic depression versus gentrification, I always think of gentrification as, you know, rising property prices, which means that people have more money. But how do you get rising property prices when nobody in the town is making money? That's one of the things that I'm sort of confused about. How are we doing that?
Yeah, that's
It's not actually that weird. It's something that's happening. We see it over in Keene as well. It's you know, second home or second apartment or condo owners are buying their town place, and they have their other Vermont place or their city place, and they're not here all the time, so they're not continually contributing to the local economy or adding that, you know, just bodies in space vibrancy.
Is that all of it though, or is that?
It's
just
not
part
all
of
of it. It's part of it though.
Yeah.
It's also focusing solely on tourism dollars to sustain the local economy is a dangerous thing too. You know,
Right.
obviously tourism dollars are a piece of the puzzle. You know, but you also need to focus on locals. You know, and poor people, and actually be inclusive and.
Right.
There was like a follow-up meeting of some of the town reps yesterday that was posted in our house, and there's kind of like a straw poll in the room of like who were all the homeowners versus renters, and sort of like of over 10, there was like maybe one who rented, and then there was like some comment about maybe like, I'm not going to get this right exactly which year, but sort of like, you know, not terribly long ago, but like of the 40-something reps from like District 1, which is maybe the more affluent, like, I don't know what it was. It was like 40 out of like the 42. You know, it was like a huge majority who were all homeowners. And like right there was kind of this like, there was like no representation of like people who rent. There's a lot of talk about affordable space, There are a lot of people who are renting, but it's just like their voices are not.
The housing stock is about 50% homeowner, 50% rental.
Yeah, but I mean, but the people who are having conversations are mostly.
The
Right,
cost.
right.
It's, I think one of the real factors is the cost to rehabilitate the older housing stock, and that's all over Vermont and really all of the US and the towns and, right? And the numbers, but, you know, I'm putting obscene amounts of money into rehabilitating a home for a family to live with no intention to sell it.
Which is a good thing, because you would.
And that numbers just aren't there, it's just.
Also, too, people are unable to afford to buy homes, you know, just because of the cost of living,
Yeah.
you know, unlivable wages and stuff. You know, it's harder to buy a house these days. You know, get a bank loan and also be able to afford to pay for the bank loan.
Yeah.
You know, it's different. You know.
And you already have a different debt.
Yep. Yeah, it's like student loan debt or whatever else.
So, I mean, I don't know how much of that we can do in the purview of the planning commission, but it's. There's a lot of things I'd like to do
Let's try to
about
do
it,
something
but-
about that.
But, you know, I mean, it is, you know, the things we do with, you know, the residential zoning and things that we did with the new zoning things that went out. And then also with the downtown master plan, I think there's a balance there to be struck between having things be affordable and accessible for people who make Brattleboro interesting. Because otherwise, you know, there's not going to be anything for tourists or second homeowners to come and see. And I think there's a balance there that, you know, we have to try to strike to make all those people happy, because people make this town interesting, you know, who are maybe working in creative placemaking or who are artisans or, you know, doing these things that don't earn them a lot of money and they need to be able to live here and work here. And then the people who are coming to consume those things and enjoying it, you know, need to come here too, yeah, to make it viable for them. So it's a hard balance.
And someone brought up something about rent control at town meeting or in one of the, this is Chris, whatever. And I thought, oh yeah, that's interesting. Like, how do we have that conversation? And where legally does that actually exist, right? But then simultaneously, I wonder about like a different kind of conversation with Windham Windsor Housing Trust to provide specific, you know, like they're already providing specific housing for low-income people, but it's like, can you provide studio space for artists? Like, are there different ways to expand that type of work too?
I thought they used to in this building right next to us.
They have housing, I don't know if any of it's specifically for artists housing.
I thought it used to be.
I mean,
But,
about the co-op.
Or maybe it's some
No,
of it.
just right here
That
above,
one,
in the same as River Gallery and Windham Wines. Who remembers that?
I do.
What was I gonna say? I forget, never mind.
Well, there are models for, you know, like artist-owned cooperatives where they have the workspace and, you know, models where like, let's say in the People's Building situation where artists organized and brought in, you know, the kind of institutional support to help them create their own investment cooperative and like create a structure for sustainable, you know, sustainably maintaining that as affordable artist space. Obviously, there wasn't a circumstance for that to happen here, but it's not like a completely unheard of thing. And there's like affordable artist studio development in Bellows Falls right now. Not to say that those are like, you know, one-to-one comparable circumstances, but there are, you know, there are things that could be done to kind of similar to what Windham Windsor Housing does to make it more possible. And I do think that like this question of like as redevelopment happens and reinvestment happens in downtown, which it will, and there's this like potential for gentrification. I think it's a very hard question to say like how do we stop gentrification from happening, but also there's a question of like, you know, really trying to steer things like the downtown master plan or any kind of like planning and development guidance towards like how does new development benefit the community and benefit public spaces. And like, how can you craft a narrative that's like, positively aligning with what people want to, what they want to see out of new development, with the kind of the guidelines that actually shape how things get built. And so talking about the quality of public spaces around buildings and the relationship to the waterfront and streetscape quality and all of those things. I mean, it can get into sort of like technical details, but I do think I don't know, it can kind of help make those conversations a little bit more connected, so people can understand that new development doesn't necessarily mean just like you're going to get priced out. But short of having like a community benefits agreement or having like a really organized constituency that's engaged with a big project like the Art Museum, it is very hard to ensure that those voices and stakeholders are going to be involved in the process. So that's it.
Yeah, and there needs to be a common value set. I don't think there's a common value set.
So that's where we need to get to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's where we need to get to.
Common value set.
Yeah, and
Common
simultaneously,
value
I
set.
don't know, I keep thinking of that big Home Depot space that's just empty, sitting there, waiting for
I
something
kind
to
of-
happen,
That makes me think again, she was saying about like within the purview of and powers of what the planning commission can do, and with people talking about how we're up against the wall of like occupancy and rates being high, but like, is there like a push for development or for change of uses, and maybe our zoning rules are a constraint? Or, if is there something we can do to, it doesn't seem like people are knocking down the door saying like, hey, we want to build here, but the rules don't allow us. So,
Brattleboro has had very little
right.
private development since we have done the land use regs, and it's not because of the regulations. When we have had developers in, from out of state, they're like, oh, this is great, exactly what you want, like, this is really good. We just, all the development that's happening here is nonprofits.
It's just a function of
BHP
greater
and Windham Windsor
culture.
Housing Trust
Right.
are kind of our big ones.
Because what since they have a bunch of the
Because
grants
they
and
can
funding they
access
have
them,
isn't
right.
really so tied to economics.
Also,
Like it would be for
developable
private.
property is extremely scarce here too.
It is, we have a lot of properties that, are probably ripe for redevelopment, but we have a lot of landowners that
Are not
Yeah.
don't need to sell them yet.
I keep going back to the economics of it, but it's the economics of if you have an older building, whether it's a home or it's, space like this, to redevelop that in a way to make it usable is very expensive, and then you have the rents go up, or the price of buying that home goes up, versus, if you're Home Depot and you leave that building empty, you take a tax write-off on it. And then if you want to come along and you're Lowe's or something and you want to put in a new building, you put in a new building, you don't rehabilitate Home Depot. And that's how you get sprawl, which is happening in Burlington. And, it's like, it's not what we want here. And I don't have a perfect solution for it, but, that is sort of like what I think about when I'm doing stuff with the planning commission.
Is the Home Depot even for sale, or is it just?
It's not even that it's the tax write-off, they are actually getting monthly lease off of it. So Home Depot is paying the owners of that until like, I don't remember, is it like 2030? So
they have no reason to.
they have no
That's a
immediate reason, which doesn't mean a conversation, can't try a conversation, but they're not losing money, they're making money off an empty building.
And my understanding too is that
Yeah.
they also don't want competition from like a Lowe's or something to move in, so that they're better off not holding on to the space and not allowing other people to access it.
Because people,
I
Who knows? Yeah.
I don't know.
How can they,
about that
how can they
part, but-
worry about competition when they're not there?
I think.
I don't think
Yeah.
Lowe's is, Home Depot is
Yeah.
the key.
No.
That's, I
People
can talk about that another time, that's
Yeah,
pretty
we can
complicated.
Yeah.
We should do some creative placemaking in that Home Depot space, in
We
the
just
parking lot,
squat
and
it.
it just be,
Just-
yes,
just go
exactly,
and
let's
open the
just
doors.
set some shit up there and have people come.
It's not the
I feel
planning
like-
commission.
Lots of people have great ideas, but.
Everybody wants
I'm one of those
people.
No, like I said, and maybe at some point it's worth a conversation with the property owner, but the last time it was, I get my monthly, rent.
I'm really worried about getting off track, especially from what these folks are doing. A real quick
Yeah,
concept
me
of,
too.
oh yeah, never mind.
Go ahead.
We'll talk about it later.
No.
I don't
I didn't mean to
even
do
want
that.
to talk about it.
No.
I was in Lake George last fall for a motorcycle event, and I went to a restaurant. They have the worst restaurants there. You know,
Where is this?
Lake George.
Okay, what is
Yeah.
characterized as the
So I
worst?
went to this restaurant. I was going to all of them. I was there all alone. I was there for a week-long event, and I was eating at all these different eateries. And finally, like the second to last day, I went to a Chinese restaurant. And when I was paying for the meal, the woman asked me for my ID. I don't drink or anything like that. You know, and I was like, why? And like I pulled out my wallet, like not knowing why she was asking me for my ID, and she's like, I'm seeing if you're a local. And I'm like, why? You know, and she was like, because you get a discount if you're a local to like New York State or to this area. And I'm like, whoa, that's cool. So I'm just planting the seed. I wonder if there's something the planning commission can do. Obviously, like when it comes to rent stabilization or whatever, like if you can't show your ID and be like, give me cheap rent, you know. But like when it comes to just being more affordable of an area, especially like now that we have this horrible 7% tax coming in, you know, like if locals could like not could do something about that. I have no idea if this is a planning commission.
Well, it's sort of
It's
on
not
top
something
of
we
that,
can
you
require.
can simultaneously then collect data on where people are from, right? Which would be
Yeah.
useful for our businesses to actually know. So it's
Yeah.
probably a good suggestion for Brattleboro.
Yeah. So just a concept I've been thinking about a lot. Someone kind of brought it up at town meeting, but it's kind of an interesting thing. But obviously, the state has control of our taxes and what the money goes towards, and it seems like we have no control. But I wonder if we could explore something like that. I don't know if that's.
I'm sure we can look at it. I
Yeah.
can't make any promises.
Obviously,
I mean,
I'm
what a
not-
business
yeah.
owner
Yeah.
decides to do.
Yeah, but I mean more for like a town of like, okay, like if we're trying to capitalize off of tourism, it's like, all right, let's do that, but let's not capitalize off of, you know, poor people. You know what I mean? So it's just,
I do, I
yeah, I have zero
cannot make
idea.
any promises,
Yeah.
but I can do a little research.
Yep.
Well, since we're kind of wrapping up, I mean, I guess whatever sort of follow-up, whether it's like next meeting that you have, you know, as far as either reviewing minutes, you know, from this meeting or, you know, some way that maybe we can have some sort of follow-up conversation, you know, as we're kind of pulling together all of the, you know, data essentially and stories and kind of like are thinking about how we want to process that, you know, for us to kind of be in conversation.
That would be nice. It could also, I'd like to hear more about, when we do get together again, about your ideas about how, you know, what outreach techniques we're working and with people, with different groups of people, you know, what kind of responses you're getting, how to reach those people. I'm not even on Instagram, so I'd be really interested to hear those things.
And if you have thoughts about, you know, future activities for this group or other organizations that would be interesting to kind of bring into conversation, I think moving forward, this idea of trying to partner with others, I mean, that's, I think, where some of the most powerful conversations have happened is when we brought in other folks from other institutions and
Just have a meeting together.
yeah. So we're very open to those suggestions. If you want to take one of these cards, if you're not on social media, we also just have a Gmail account. Email that you can send ideas to. And just as like a last comment on the downtown plan and some of the police-making outreach elements, I guess as you're evaluating proposals and thinking about the community engagement pieces, I saw that there was a requirement in the RFP or suggestion of working with community to talk about how the consultants would work with community partners. And I think that is a really powerful statement to have in the RFP and something that I would look really closely at in terms of how the consultant responds to that piece. I think that you just really, there's only ever so much money in a budget that can go towards engagement, and you could put all $40,000 towards community engagement, it may not be enough. And so figuring out how you can get more mileage out of it, because again, just like there's existing infrastructure and communication infrastructure in the community already. And if you can figure out how to tap into that, I think that's one way to just get more voices in the conversation.
Also, our meetings are open to the public if you guys want to to send people to.
Yeah, we're first Monday of the month at 6 in the community library, or community room in the library.
Almost around a location like this,
And
which is
yeah.
awesome.
This is more fun to get out of
Yeah,
here.
yeah, this is kind of nice, it's nice to have a visual on the
It's
world.
really great, yeah.
One thing I'd like to kind of have us pursue maybe or think about is to really get some sort of tangible product is take like one of these top things that kept coming up, one of these key priorities or things people value and like plug it into our imaginary planning commission, decision tree or something and just see like what's the range of what we can possibly do. What's conventional, what's like creative and hasn't been done but still is within the planning commission purview. What have other towns done?
Sounds like it could be a fun thing to do at the main meeting.
Yeah. So, because I mean, keeping a store that people remember fondly, like we have no control over that. Right, like the business that's in it. But as far as like how
I don't
many
know.
businesses can be per acre.
That's an interesting zoning question. Can you require that the poster of a building be put on the side of the building as part of the zoning, right? Before
The
me,
type of-
there was Dunkin'.
Yeah.
Before that,
I
this
think-
was.
That'd be fun. Maybe.
I don't know if we could require it, but we could do a community project.
One thing business owners do.
There's,
not like
White
is
River
like
Junction has some really cool
flyers.
plaques in their historic downtown about this, what was there. They've got some good ones. If we had the CLG, then we could go after a grant for that.
CLT.
Community, local, is it community? It's been
Oh,
so
it's
long.
that-
Community
that-
local
that-
government.
Silly.
Yeah, it's just
It's a
federal.
bad name, it's a ridiculous
Yes.
name that doesn't say what it is.
Certified local government. It's out of the state gets federal funding, and if you're a CLG, you get some technical assistance and you have access to funding for kind of historic preservation activities. So it could be plaques, it could be walking tours, it could be documenting. So it opens up a funding source. All right. Well, thank you so much for having
Thank you very much
us.
for having us.
Do we
And
have
for
to-
the
I'm sorry.
food.
So we need like an official motion
Adjournment.
to adjourn. I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we adjourned it. Blah, blah,
Kathy,
blah,
what is that
9:09.
cool little pouchy thing?
Because he